Hi guys, today we're taking a look at the Canon AE-1 program. Now there's quite a lot of difference between an AE-1 program and an AE-1, and I'll refer you to, I did a previous video on the AE-1. The AE-1 program is less sophisticated in terms of the user interface, and it's easier to use. This particular AE-1 was a gift from a friend. When these were new in 1981, they cost $165. On eBay, they're worth about $85 nowadays. Some go for more, some go for less. I'd love to say the condition on this one is fair. The only problem I had with it when I got it was the rewind flip-up lever was broken off, and that could be easily replaced if I found another old Canon camera someplace, and I might do that someday soon. But it worked fine, and the battery in it actually worked from the user that gave it to me. Unfortunately, when I went to test it just before this video, it wouldn't work. I replaced the battery and that didn't fix it. I think the actual switch for the shutter release is bad, and I plan to take it apart and try and fix it at the end of this video. And stay tuned. We'll see whether I succeed or fail or just plain give up and put it back together. Because for me, as long as from 10 feet away is cosmetically good, I'm happy with the camera. Let me lower your expectations. I did take it apart and put it together at the end of the video, and I failed. These were made from 1981 to 1987, and it turns out this was one of the most popular cameras of all time. It's known today as the best film camera for beginners for under $100. It has a finder that's one of the largest, clearest, and brightest finders ever made. The finder is bigger than the finder in the Canon 5D Mark II, and much bigger and brighter than the finder in the Nikon D3X. It has interchangeable focusing screens, an optional power winder, an optional motor drive, which is just like the power winder but with a large grip, and an optional data back. So let's take a look at this camera. Start with the top. Here's the rewind knob, and again the little flip up crank is missing. I should replace that one day. This little button here is to lock the ASA or the film speed setting, and this little lever here is to change the ASA or film speed setting. So right now it won't move. Right now it's set at ASA 400. If I press the button down and turn the dial, I could set it to ASA 800 or 400. It goes in little clicks. There's 2 steps in between each EV change of one. I'll put it back to ASA 400. There's a film plane indicator. The serial number is on the top, which is kind of interesting. It's a lot easier to find than on a lot of cameras. And this little button has multiple purposes. It's the battery check button. So if you hold it down, it should beep. If I have it in the auto position, probably. And the rapid beeping means the battery's good, and it should be. I just put it in a couple days ago. I'll go back to the lock position. It also does the self-timer. So if you were in self-timer mode, and that's this lever on the right, here's lock, here's auto for taking normal pictures. And auto would, I shouldn't say auto, it's A for automatic or whatever. It just means it enables the light meter and the function of the camera. Otherwise, the shutter's locked and it doesn't do anything. And S is for the self-portrait mode or the self-timer. So in that case, if you press the shutter button, it should trigger the self-timer, and it should work. It worked the other day for me. Well, I'm going to cock the shutter. Now, I have to warn you, this is the last time we'll be able to cock the shutter because it won't release properly. There's the self-timer going off, probably 10 seconds. And here is where you would normally hear the click in the shutter. And if I remove the back, you can release the shutter and it'll function again. But for now on, I can't advance the shutter anymore because it's locked up. And then we have a hot shoe. Of course, Canon has some clever flashes that will do clever things, and each one of those has its own manual. There's a frame counter window, and it automatically sets to 0 when you open the back and change the film. Here's the shutter speed dial, and it goes from B to 2 seconds to 1 second, and then counts up to a thousandth of a second. And the nice thing about this camera is that it's a lot like the Fuji X-T3s and 4s. It's easily set for shutter priority or aperture priority or program mode. So on the lens, if you set it to the A button, which there's a lock for that, when you get over to f22 you have to press this button to rotate the aperture ring to A. And if you set the shutter speed to program, then it's in fully automatic mode or program mode. Now program is kind of mislabeled, because indeed if I index this off of, press this little release button and turn the aperture to something other than automatic, like in this case f8, now it's really in aperture priority mode. I've set the aperture here. With this in program, it will set the shutter speed only. And the opposite is also true. If I set this in automatic again, like that, and then set the shutter speed to, say, 250th of a second, now it's in shutter priority mode. That is the shutter speed, and the aperture is on automatic. And again, if you set them both to program and automatic, then it's in fully automatic mode, which is pretty cool. Makes it easy to use, not a lot of controls. Put it in program mode, focus, push the button, and you'll take good pictures. And if you set the aperture to f8 and the shutter speed to 1/500th, you'll be in complete manual mode. If you set the self timer and press the button and the self timer starts and you decide to stop it, there's two ways. You can either press the battery test button, that will stop the self timer countdown, or you can just flip it to lock and it'll stop. So it has that extra function. And of course, this is the film wind lever. The shutter release button is fully threaded, so you can put a cable release on it. On the camera front, it gets a little more interesting. This is an action grip, and you can remove that, and there's a little screw there. I'm going to get a penny. If I turn that just a little bit, then I can do the rest with my finger. I have successfully removed the action grip. And getting that threaded in there is kind of a bear. This little compartment is where you get at the battery. And it's interesting, the manual tells you to remove, when you get the camera brand new, there's a little cover for the hot shoe, and the end of the cover is the right shape to press in that hole to flip it up to change the battery. But in reality, anything that gets in there and jams it up can flip it up and change the battery. I'm going to use these needle nose pliers. Now this one, for some reason, is particularly difficult to remove. I don't know why. My Canon AE-1, not the program, removes much easier. And there's the battery. It's a little 6-volt battery. Standard 4 LR44s, 6 volts. There's all kinds of different brands and several replacement numbers that are equivalents. They all work, and it just pops in, easy peasy. And I'll leave the battery door open because later I'm going to remove it and try to repair the camera, and I'll have to take the battery in and out several times. Okay, on the front of the camera, you get rid of the lens cap. There's these two buttons on the side. Well, there's of course a sync port with a cover. There's these two buttons on the side. The top one is the auto exposure lock button, and if you point the camera at the correct area you want to do the exposure in, it's center weighted, and press that button in, it will stay there so you can recompose and shoot. And the bottom button is the exposure preview button, which actually just turns on the meter and you can look through the viewfinder and see the setting that it has chosen, so you can figure out whether you want to change. You move the dials to make it correct when you're in manual mode. This lever down here, well, the lever is a stretch. It's a combination. It's mechanical arrangement. It's the same as on the AE-1. This is your depth of field preview. So you flip this little lever up and push it in. And I have to be in, I can't be in auto mode. I'll set it at F16. You push it in, and it locks it into F16. And you'll notice this little chrome button. So right now you would be looking through the viewfinder, it would be very dark because you're at F16, but you'd see the proper depth of field. And then to release it, when you flip this back down, that pushes down the little lock button, and it pops back, and it goes back to F, in this case, 1.8. I'll flip this down and worry about the battery compartment later. The release button for the lens is on the lens, not on the camera. And so this little chrome button on the side of this lens is how you release it. And you just press the button, turn the lens, and off it comes. Easy peasy. And unlike a lot of cameras, this one's really easy to align with this big red rod button and the red one there, straight up. Probably the easiest one of single lens reflex cameras to replace the lens. This is the aperture ring, which we've been moving around, and then the scale on the front for the depth of field indicator. And there is a little red dot on it for infrared focusing. And this is the focus ring. And in this case, it focuses, the green scale is in feet, so it's just under 2 feet away for the closest distance for this particular f1.8 lens. On the sides of the camera, we only have the lug straps, nothing else to look at. On the camera back, we have this big, beautiful viewfinder. This one has a rubber eye cup on it, which is kind of handy. And again, to release the back, you use the film rewind knob. You just pull up on it, and that releases the back. And my rubber thing is a little in the way, and there you see the film back. Loading it is pretty easy. You just stretch it across, stick the little slot in, crank it forward like any other single lens reflex. Pretty easy peasy. There's a film reminder window to stick the cardboard from your film pack in there, which everybody used to do in the old days. And on the bottom, we have lots of activity. There's a 1/4-20 tripod socket. This is the button to release the film, to rewind it if I had a crank. Otherwise, I'd have to do it the hard way. This is just a cover. It's not a battery. It looks like a battery lid, but it's just a cover for access into the motor drive assembly, which is optional. And then there's 3 screws to take the back off, and I've had it off and on several times. And then these 2 holes are the alignment pins for accessory motor drives, and those 4 are the connectors for the electronics for a motor drive. And I've got an AE-1 with a motor drive. Perhaps I'll hook that up if I can get this to work. Perhaps I'll hook that up in the end and try and make it work. So that's it. It's a pretty camera, but like I say, it doesn't work. So the next step is I'm going to try and repair it, and wish me luck. But again, all I really care about is the cosmetics. So I hope I can take the top off and get at it. I really want to get at this shutter switch, and hopefully it's just dirty and that'll fix the problems. I think it's probably a 50-50 chance if I get to the switch that it is dirty and that's the problem. It could very well be something else. But like I said, when I got it, everything worked fine. So the only thing that's different is it sat here for about 5 years collecting dust. And I'm in Arizona. We do have dust. We don't have much moisture. So stay tuned. There might be a part 2 on this where I try to take this apart. The directions say to remove the 6 top cover screws. I removed 7, so I probably removed one that I shouldn't have. Perhaps that one, I just don't know. I want to set the ASA to 100, I guess for reminding. I think I need snap ring pliers. Just a minute. That was a not so quick trip to the garage. I hope one of these two will do, but I doubt it. This one is bent, and it's probably even then still too big. What these really need is just a little force and a screwdriver, I think. Got it. You could tell that screw hasn't been out before, or those screws. That ought to be fun to get back on. Another snap ring. Aha! Took me long enough to figure that out. This has to come off. And then there are two more screws that we couldn't see. Now we have some wires we're supposed to carefully remove. And of course I should, but the reality is I just want to get at this switch. This switch right here. So this should be the shutter release. Pushing it that far should energize the meter reading and exposure, and then pressing it down to contact with that other switch, or even pushing them real hard all the way to the ground, should fire the shutter. And it doesn't. Is it the switch? Who knows? But let's I mean, it doesn't look dirty, but then how could it? It's time for sandpaper and contact cleaner. I'll have to go back out to the garage. Okay, let's try cleaning this. First, spray it with contact cleaner. I'm sure you're probably not supposed to do that. Let's put a battery in. And I'm just curious, I don't know where ground is here. That's 6 volts. Well, I didn't fire a shutter.
Are you doing that?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I don't know if I've improved it or ruined it, but we're going to put it back together and see what happens. I'm worried about these wires. So hopefully I can stop worrying about the wires. Who knows if I crushed any. Yeah, you probably should argue I should be testing it now as soon as I get some knobs on it, but I'm just going to put it together, and if it works, it works. Done. Well, it looks like I haven't gained a thing. It is what it is. Well, I failed at that, but you know, there's a lot of stuff on the YouTube about repairing these, and a lot of them probably claim the solenoid in the bottom over here is defective, and they replace it, or they ways of testing it. I found that there was no voltage going to that solenoid ever when I was depressing the switch, so I was convinced it was in the switch up here, and it still may be, or it could be a wire that deteriorated. Whatever it is, it's going back on the shelf. It's a beautiful little camera. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.